The reason your volunteers are leaving may be different from what you think. We're going to talk about what might be happening today on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Matthew.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I am joined by my friend and co-host, AJ Matthew. AJ, welcome back to the podcast.
Well, thank you for welcoming me back to the podcast, Scott.
And listener, welcome back to you as well. We're glad that you are with us. And today we're talking about a very important topic. And I want to, before we hop into the meat of it, I want to maybe frame the problem. One of the constant problems, AJ, that we see in churches and that I hear about from pastors, and I know you do too, is we don't have enough volunteers. And it certainly may be true that you're not recruiting enough folks, and we have some challenges there, but also we might have an attrition problem, especially coming out of the pandemic. Some of our folks just quit volunteering, or some of our folks are getting burned out and leaving. And we want to help you. We actually want to give you some tips today, some things that you can do to retain your volunteer team. So this is not focusing on recruiting. This is focusing on making sure you don't have volunteers who quit, because volunteers quit, AJ.
They do indeed quit. And we're kind of staying focused, I think, on an area in which does drive loss of volunteers, and that's in the vein of communication. And I mean, just before we hit record on here, Scott, you just mentioned volunteers are way more likely to quit by lack of communication than they are by over communication. And I think if anybody takes just a second and thinks about that, you would probably find that true for yourself. You would much rather work in an environment in which there's a little too much information about what's expected and what you should be doing, what is supposed to be happening, when and how, than leaving you with questions. That's is right. Where frustration enters into the equation, is in unclear or lack of communication, not with an abundance of clarity, so much so that you're like, I totally get this. You've just told me one too many times. That's probably not what's going to drive them to leave, unless you're like annoying about it. Don't do that.
Yeah, completely. I want to recall you back to, I wish I had thought to look up this episode number before I started saying this, but go back all the way to an episode we did with Bo Patterson. You can kind of scroll back on the episodes list if you're looking at your app or whatever. He talked about how you need to stop training your volunteers. And which sounds a little bit crazy, but what he mentioned in that podcast, and it was such a good insight that I really learned more about this and leaned into it since he shared it with us. It's this idea that what really enhances team effectiveness is not training, is not getting people in a room and telling them what to do. It's three things. The first one, which we're not going to talk about these two today, but it's incentives and consequences. That's number 3 on the list. Number 2 on the list is tools and resources. So giving people tools and resources. But the number one thing that boosts a team's performance is clear and consistent communication. And that's true for retention. It's true for leadership development. It's the most fundamental thing that you can do. And so what we want to do today is I want to give you 3 strategies, 3 tips, 3 things that you can do that's going to enhance communication. And by doing that, it's actually going to help you retain volunteers and keep you from losing folks. And so these things might seem very simple to you, but I guarantee you probably aren't doing all 3. If you're continuing to listen to this episode, like if you're doing all 3 of these things, you probably are like, I don't have a problem with retention, right? So if you're going, no, I'm losing volunteers, my guess is you're not doing these 3 things.
Yeah, I would. Well, first, let me interject. That was episode 76, by the way, that you were referencing. That came out in February of 2021. Okay. So you can go back and listen to that episode. Um, but yeah, I think everybody loses volunteers. I mean, you don't get the same volunteers. I mean, you lose them for varying reasons, healthy or unhealthy.
Fair enough.
But I would encourage
You're
our
losing a lot
listeners.
of them, though.
Yeah. But
Flag.
even then, that was kind of where I was getting to in this proportionally. I mean, if you're a smaller church and you've lost, 2 or 3 people in the last 6 months, you should know, why did those folks leave? Because if you're just thinking, well, yeah, I've only lost a couple people, but you don't know why they left, this could be applicable to you as well. So
Yeah, that's right.
you don't have to
Fair
be
enough.
losing them by the score to say maybe I have a problem. It's proportional to the size of your team, and so hey, it's worth considering.
Yep. Very good. Well, let's hop in then. What are these 3 things that we could be doing that are going to help us retain volunteers and just do a better job of building our team?
Yeah. So number 1, everybody's favorite, we're telling you, email. Do an email, weekly team email. But unpack that, Scott. Let's explain. We're not just saying, hey, you should email people.
Yeah. So let me first, before I explain the role of the email, let me give just a broad category that all 3 of these things are going to fall into. And I probably should have done this earlier, but it's feedback. It's ways of providing clear and consistent communication or feedback. And so each of these are 3 ways that you can do that, and you need to be doing all 3 of them. And so the first one that AJ has mentioned here is sending a weekly email. And no one loves email. And it doesn't have to be email. If your team is using Slack or you're using some other mode of communication, you can do it there. So, I mean, I'm not dialing in on email specifically, but you need to be sending some weekly communication that is all team. What do I mean by all team? I mean, whatever a whole team is. So it's not the church-wide email. This is a team-wide email. So something you would maybe send to all of your children's ministry volunteers, or if you're a large enough church, maybe you have to subdivide that and go an email that goes to all the elementary volunteers and one that goes to all of the preschool and nursery volunteers. An email that goes to all of the people who are involved in the Sunday morning worship. So the band, the tech, the ushers, the greeters, those folks. So however you want to group that, but you need to be sending an email or some sort of communication weekly that gets everybody on the same page. Why? Well, because things are different from week to week, and sometimes things didn't work well the week before, and you want to communicate something to do differently. So I used to, when I was leading the creative arts ministry in a church, I would send a weekly email, and I was also in charge of overseeing all the ushers and greeters as well. So I would be sure to tell all of the greeters, hey, Jim, you're at the front door. Hey, Sally, your post is, here at this corner or whatever. And I would assign them so that when the greeter showed up on Sunday morning, AJ, they weren't going, well, where am I supposed to stand this week? Mm-hmm. Where am I supposed to go? That confusion causes some conflict, some frustration, some gap between expectation and reality. And those are the kinds of things that make people go, I don't really want to do this. But if I know, okay, I got to show up 15 minutes before the service, put my lanyard on, and I'm standing at, the front door, I've reduced the amount of friction for that volunteer. Does that make sense, AJ?
Yeah. Let me probe with a question for some
Okay.
detail on this.
Okay.
Should this email go out to that entire team, regardless of whether an individual is scheduled to serve that week, or do I need to customize this email for only those serving in that particular week?
That's a really good question. I think that you can play it by ear and see what works best for your team. I have done it both ways. The trick is you have to, if you're going to customize it to who's serving that week, you have to remember that, make sure that you hit everybody that's supposed to serve that week. Right. So you don't leave anybody off that email.
Right. So the people that aren't serving aren't then confused, adding confusion by them going, wait, I thought it was off. Why did I get this email? Well,
or vice versa, where you're customizing it every week. So you're only sending it to the people who are serving that week, but then you accidentally leave Dave off the email that week, and Dave is supposed to serve, and Dave's like, I didn't get a weekly email. I'm confused. What am I supposed to do? You can actually compound the problem. So what I eventually started doing personally, and this is just what I did, I sent it to the whole team every week, but in the email, I bolded, whenever there was a person's name, I bolded it in the email. So what a lot of people ended up doing, they got in the habit of doing, is they wouldn't read the whole email. They would read the first little intro paragraph that I would write, and then they would scroll the email to see if their name was anywhere in there bolded. And if their name was bolded, they knew that there was something they needed to pay attention to. If there wasn't, then they knew that they were off the hook. And so that was just my little simple solution to it. But you can obviously do what you want to do. But I also would include, this is especially true if you're talking about the band and tech. If you're using something like Planning Center, attach the cue sheet for that week from Planning Center so that everybody knows, here's the songs we're doing, here's the order we're doing them in, so that everyone's on the same page about when the transitions are and what needs to happen. Hopefully you're doing things like rehearsals and stuff like that anyway, before Sunday morning. I know a lot of churches are really bad about, they run their band practice right before church and they're still practicing while people are walking in, and I hate that. But hopefully you can get at least an email out with the cue sheet attached, so everybody has a clear understanding of what is happening. And that reduces a lot of friction and a lot of tension for teams. I know that sounds stupid even, AJ, or simple, but a lot of churches are not doing this, and it's creating tension on their teams, and it makes people want to quit.
Yeah, I totally get. I mean, I'm a person that I need information. A lack of information increases my anxiety level exponentially. And so I know if I was serving on a team and I wasn't quite sure what was happening week to week, or if there was anything different that I should be aware of, I would find a lot of comfort in having received the communication ahead of time, kind of know what I'm walking into, and be ready to do whatever needs to be done. So,
well, and on that note, AJ, you should send it at the same time every week, so it's predictable.
I was thinking that. Yes.
Yeah. So, for me, when I was doing this, I would always send it on Thursday. People could expect that they would get it on Thursday. Yeah. That way, if someone then read it, oh no, I forgot to tell them I'm out of town. Well, then I didn't send it on Friday. I sent it on Thursday, so then I've still got Friday to deal with whatever mess comes from that email, right? Like I could clean up the mess before. I didn't want to be on Sunday morning surprised that Dave isn't going to be able to greet this week, right? Like I want to know that. So I sent on Thursday so that I still gave myself Friday to clean up any mess.
And make sure this email actually has details about this week. Don't turn this into something that you just resend every week. Like, hey, everybody, because you can guarantee 2 weeks after that, and everybody's not reading it anymore. So make sure it's different and relevant to the week, and has information that they would need to know, so that every week they're engaging in that email and reading it.
Yeah, and like I said, I did bullet points. So I would give like some sort of paragraph, which I probably didn't even need to do. But if you know me, even just by listening from this podcast, you know that I like to wax eloquent and inspire people. So like I usually start with some paragraph that I'm sure no one ever read. Even though I just said earlier, people would read the first paragraph. I'm sure actually they wouldn't. They would just scroll to the bullet point section where they were looking for their bolded name. But I did that for simplicity. I didn't want people to have to read paragraphs and paragraphs of text to find the thing that's relevant to them. I always tried to keep it bolded names so that people could find the thing that was relevant to them.
There you go. That's a good one. Get that weekly email out for your team so that everybody knows what's happening that week at church. All right, number 2, this is the stand-up meeting. Informal meeting. Scott, let's talk about it.
It's a formal informal meeting. It's formal in the sense that it's regular. So I recommend that every team do a stand-up meeting right before they're about to serve together. So this is Sunday morning centric. This is not going to occur maybe as much when you're talking about a volunteer team of your small group leaders or things like that. But when you're talking about children's ministry volunteers or greeters or the band and the tech team or the folks who are there on sort of the Sunday morning teams, have a stand-up meeting so that it's a little bit of like a muster meeting. Make sure that everybody's there. Everybody shows up 15 minutes before, because that's when we're going to be doing our stand-up meeting. And you could call it a huddle or whatever. You get everybody together. You essentially recap what's in that weekly email that you sent. It shouldn't be at this point new information to anybody, But if you did have anything new that maybe is a recent development since that email, you can catch them up. Pass on any attaboys or encouragement that you need to, and then pray together. You're doing ministry together. You ought to pray together. So pray together as a team. This meeting should not be more than 2 or 3, 4, 5 minutes max. No one needs to be praying for 15 minutes. As nice as that is, this is not that time. Deliver quick information, pray together as a team, and then deploy out to where you need to go. And this is a great way to build community on the team, for everyone to realize who's here this week, who's not here. So that if someone's like, oh, hey, have you seen Jimmy? I need to ask him a question. Oh, he's not here this week. Or, oh, no, he's at this post, or whatever. Like, it's just helpful to get everybody together. If you're doing 2 services and you've got a band and a tech team, you should do this little huddle, the stand-up meeting before each service, not just before the first one, because you'll learn something after the first service. Hey, we did too many choruses. We did too many bridges of that Hillsong song. We aren't Hillsong. Let's slice this thing down a little bit. Or this transition was awkward, or whatever. Any kind of feedback that you need to deliver on how to make the second service better than the first service. And then pray again, because you're going to be doing the same thing again with a new set of people. And so it's important that you pray together. So this little stand-up meeting, it's informal in that there's not a set agenda, but it's formal in the fact that you should be doing it every week.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a really good one. Because I think still we've got a lot of people are showing up to serve in whatever their area is on Sunday morning. And over time, they figured out, yeah, I just need to go here and be there by then. And I love the aspect that you also mentioned, Scott, about kind of building that community among the team, because people then are going to scatter. Few of those folks, short of the worship team, who are all together and can't talk because of the nature of their service. Even that few minutes together, for that fist bump, high five, hug, and we know who we are. We know that we're a team. So right. I think these are small things that over time make big differences. And so don't
minimize. They really do. It makes a big difference if me feeling like I am a greeter versus I'm part of the greeting team. It's night and day.
That's right.
I'm doing a job versus we are on a mission. Those are two. You got 2 people doing the same technical role, but coming at it from 2 very different angles, and the sense of satisfaction that comes from it is much different when I feel like, I got to hustle and get there and put my lanyard on and get to my post, versus getting that fist bump and being prayed for and getting to, those things really, they make a difference in a person's perception of their role on the team and the value that they bring and the importance that they have. And they are important. What they're doing is important. If you believe that.
These are some of the little elements, these almost intangible elements that truly affect culture in your church. Those volunteers, that person that's maybe a greeter right now on that First Impressions team that, meets weekly and gets these weekly emails, might eventually be the leader of that team, might eventually be a staff member on the church, coming up through and participating in these regular things that are meaningful and informative will be things that will be sustainable in your church long term. So building in these small things compile into what becomes the leadership and volunteer culture of your church. And I think that's the missing element in a lot of churches, that they feel like they know that it's a missing link. They don't have this necessarily cultural aspect to their volunteer teams and to their leadership structures. And these are pieces that help build that over time. Culture happens over time. And so implementing these things with regularity will help get you to that place.
All right. Number 3, last one.
Individual contact with your volunteers. Individual contact. People want to know that they exist, right? That you know who they are. And we've talked about this in other aspects, that everybody should be known. And volunteering in the church, it should be a way in which you are best known, even, if your church, especially if your church is struggling with small groups or Sunday school classes or anything else that might get people together. Volunteering in the church is a way for people to get to know you and for you to get to know others. And so having that individual contact is a key element. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important that you actually pay attention. And this is something that, you know, I'll toot my own horn and say I was good about getting the weekly email out. I'll throw myself under the bus on this one and admit that, you know, for me, one of the things I always struggled with, I think I've maybe talked about this on the podcast before, is getting out of my own head on a Sunday morning. You know, whatever it is that I was doing, if I was leading worship that week, if I was preaching that week, if I was leading some team or whatever, it was really easy for me to get in my own head and just get that real tunnel vision and just be thinking about what I needed to do. But good leadership is having that panoramic vision, kind of try to look outside yourself a little bit and notice what's happening. And to be quite frank, AJ, if you're having to run yourself so hard on a Sunday morning just to get things done, then you've really not built your team the way you need to in the first place. You should have enough margin to be able to notice what's going on with the team that you are leading, both the people that you are directly leading and the people who are maybe part of your teams further down the pipeline, and be able to notice who's doing well, who's struggling, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities. And so reaching out to people individually and being like, hey, I saw how you interacted with that family this week. That's exactly what we want you to do as a greeter. Thank you so much for noticing, you know, the Smith family, and their kids had a great time, by the way, and you set the tone for that. Like noticing those things and being able to show honor. That goes back to that episode with Bo. So incentives and consequences. If you're not noticing what's going on with your team, you won't be able to give the incentive, which is showing honor, or the consequences, which is having difficult conversations when people aren't doing well. You have to be able to pay attention and then follow that up with a personal conversation. But it can be something as simple, AJ, as just a little note or a text. Hey, great job today, Dave. Really appreciate all of your help. You're a great part of this team. So glad to have you. Those things, people don't get those messages, AJ. And so when you do them, especially if you don't barrage people with them, but they're actually genuine and heartfelt, makes a world of difference in people wanting to be a part of your team. They're not going to quit if they feel like, man, I'm a really valued member of this team.
Yeah. So just to recap, we talked about having a weekly team email go out that's going to provide some good, relevant information for your team that week. We talked about having a stand-up meeting right before that service time happens so that you can just circle the team back together, have that community building moment.
Or whatever the volunteering opportunity is, if you have a whole team together. So it could be a Awana night, same thing. Anytime where you have a team working together, have a stand-up meeting before. Just to be clear, I don't want to make it just Sunday.
Yeah. And then that individual contact, you as a leader for however many people that you're serving with and helping to lead, just making that individual contact with them often. These are 3 free things that you can do in your church that you could implement next week and would over time have a dramatic impact on the volunteer experience and retention rate of your teams at your church. We highly encourage this and hope that you'll really take this to heart.
You know, that's a really good point, AJ, that you just made. And I don't even know if you meant to make it, but these are the kinds of things that you don't get an immediate return on it tomorrow, but over time it pays huge dividends. It's the sort of thing that builds trust with a team over the long term. So you should view it that way. You can't be like, oh yeah, I'll try this thing that I heard on this podcast for a week. Yeah. You know, in fact, when you first start sending an email or something like that, people will probably, and if it's not something you've been doing, people's initial reaction may be negative because it might be going, well, we'll see how long this lasts. We'll see how much they keep this up or whatever. People are going to be skeptical and cynical or whatever. But if you do these things or the stand-up meetings, oh, now I have to show up 15 minutes beforehand or whatever. Like, anytime you introduce something new, the initial blowback might be negative or you might get skepticism or cynicism. But over time, these things pay massive dividends as you build trust. So you take the long view on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the vein of having good information for people, providing good feedback, we want to make sure that you're aware that we still have a limited time promotion happening on our church ministry analysis when you can get 10% off of the regular $99 price by entering offer code 10OFF. If you go to the Malfers Group website, that's malfersgroup.com/CMA for church ministry analysis, enter the offer code there, and your church could start off next year with some great information about the areas of health that we teach and work in our strategic envisioning process.
One question that came up, because after we announced this promotion last week, was if we purchase the CMA now, we are going into Christmas time. Do we have to start that assessment process right away? And the answer is no. So you can take advantage of the discount today, but start your assessment process in the new year, in January. So yeah. You certainly could start right away, but you do not have to. You can register now, take advantage of the discount, and begin that in January.
Thanks for being with us. This has been episode 116 of the Church Revitalization Podcast, and you can read today's article at malfersgroup.com/116. We'll be back with you again next week with some new information to help your church. God bless you. Take care.